The frozen wind cut through Jessica Thompson's threadbare coat like 1,000 tiny knives as her horse collapsed beneath her, its labored breathing turning to shallow gasps before going completely still. She scrambled away from the dying animal, her fingers already numb despite her gloves, and surveyed the white wasteland around her with growing terror. The snowstorm had descended on the mountain pass between Truckee, California, and the mining camps to the east, with such sudden violence that she had barely managed to guide her horse off the main trail before visibility dropped to nothing. Now, in February of 1876, she stood alone in the Sierra Nevada mountains with night falling fast and no shelter in sight. She had been foolish to make this journey alone, but desperation had driven her forward. Her father lay sick in the mining camp of Silver Ridge, and the telegram she received 3 days ago warned that he might not survive another week. Jessica had left Truckee immediately, hiring a horse and purchasing supplies for the 2-day ride, but she had underestimated the capricious nature of winter in these mountains. The storm had blown in from nowhere, transforming a cold but manageable afternoon into a nightmare of swirling white that disoriented and froze everything it touched. Her teeth chattered violently as she tried to think. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and already she could feel the dangerous lethargy of cold seeping into her bones. She stumbled forward, hoping to find an outcropping of rock or a thick stand of trees that might provide some protection. But the snow was now falling so heavily that she could barely see 3 feet ahead. Her feet, wet from when her horse had stumbled through a hidden stream an hour before the animal's final collapse, felt like blocks of ice in her boots. Jessica wrapped her arms around herself and kept moving, knowing that to stop was to die. She was 23 years old, a seamstress in Truckee with a modest life and modest dreams, and she refused to let this mountain claim her before she could see her father one last time. But with each step, the cold penetrated deeper, and her thoughts began to scatter like leaves in the wind. She no longer knew which direction she was walking. She no longer remembered why she had come to this terrible place. All she knew was white and cold, and the overwhelming desire to simply lie down in the soft snow and rest. When her legs finally gave out and she collapsed face first into a drift, Jessica felt almost grateful. The cold still hurt, but there was a distant quality to it now, as if it was happening to someone else. She tried to push herself up, but her arms would not respond. Snow covered her back, her hair, her outstretched hands. She thought of her father, of the small house in Truckee where she had grown up after her mother died, of the careful stitches she made on wedding dresses and Sunday suits. She thought of all the things she would never do, never see, never feel. Then she thought nothing at all. Quinton Pierce had been tracking the elk for 3 hours when the storm hit, and his first thought was not for the animal but for any fool travelers who might be caught in the pass. He abandoned his hunt immediately, his powerful frame moving with surprising speed through the deepening snow as he made his way toward the main trail. Quinton had lived in these mountains for 7 years, ever since he had left the ugliness of the Civil War behind and sought peace in the wilderness. He knew every canyon and crevice, every shelter and spring. He knew the mountains could kill with casual indifference, and he knew that people who did not respect that fact often paid with their lives. At 30 years old, Quinton had the build of a man who survived through strength and skill. His shoulders were broad and heavily muscled from chopping wood, hauling game, and building the sturdy cabin that served as his home. His arms were thick with the kind of functional muscle that came from years of hard labor, not from vanity. His chest was deep and strong, his hands large and calloused. He wore his dark hair longer than was fashionable, tied back with a leather cord to keep it from his face, and a full beard covered his jaw. His eyes were a startling blue against his weathered, tanned skin. He moved through the storm with the confidence of someone who had faced worse, his fur-lined coat and heavy boots keeping him warm even as the wind howled around him. He carried a rifle across his back and a hunting knife at his belt, but his real weapons were his knowledge and his determination. Quinton checked the main trail first, then began working his way through the surrounding area in a systematic pattern, looking for any sign of travelers in distress. It was nearly dark when he spotted the dead horse, half buried in snow but still visible as a dark shape against the white. His heart sank. A dead horse meant someone was on foot in this storm, and that meant they were almost certainly dead or dying. He approached the animal and noted the saddle and bags, the quality suggesting someone with at least moderate means. He looked around, trying to determine which direction the rider might have gone, but the snow had already covered any tracks. Quinton cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted, his deep voice carrying even through the wind, but there was no answer. He began moving in an outward spiral from the horse, scanning the snow for any sign of a person. The light was fading fast now, and he knew his time was limited. In another hour it would be too dark to see anything, and anyone caught out here would be beyond saving. He was about to give up and return to his cabin for a torch, when he spotted something that did not belong, a small patch of dark fabric barely visible beneath fresh snow. Quinton rushed forward and began digging with his bare hands, uncovering first a coat, then a shoulder, then a face so pale and still that he was certain he had found a corpse. He lifted the body from the snow and was surprised to find it was a woman, young and slight, her dark hair frozen in stiff strands around her face. He pressed his fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse, and felt the faintest flutter beneath her icy skin. She was alive, but barely. Quinton did not waste time with exclamations or questions. He swept the woman up into his arms, cradling her frozen body against his chest, and began moving as quickly as the storm allowed back toward his cabin. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel how cold she was even through his thick coat. Her breathing was so shallow he had to watch her chest carefully to confirm it was happening at all. Her skin had the waxy white appearance of severe frostbite, and her lips were blue. The journey back to his cabin took 45 minutes that felt like hours. Quinton pushed himself hard, his powerful legs driving through drifts that would have stopped a smaller man, his arms never wavering in their hold on his precious burden. He talked to her as he walked, keeping up a steady stream of words even though she could not hear him, telling her she was going to be all right, that he had her now, that she just needed to hold on a little longer. When the cabin finally came into view, Quinton felt a surge of relief so intense it almost buckled his knees. He kicked the door open and carried the woman inside, grateful for the warmth that enveloped them. He had left a good fire burning before he went hunting, and the cabin was still reasonably warm, though not as hot as he would have liked. He laid the woman on the thick bearskin rug in front of the fireplace, and immediately began building up the fire, adding log after log until the flames were roaring and heat radiated through the small space. Then he turned his attention to the woman. She needed to be warmed, but he knew enough about cold injuries to know that warming her too quickly could be dangerous. He also knew that her wet clothes were stealing what little heat her body had left, and they needed to come off immediately. Quinton hesitated for only a moment, his sense of propriety warring with his knowledge of what needed to be done, before he began removing her coat. The fabric was frozen stiff, and he had to work carefully to peel it away from her body. Beneath the coat, she wore a simple dress, also soaked through and icy to the touch. Her boots were full of frozen water and took considerable effort to remove. Quinton worked quickly but gently, stripping away each sodden layer until she lay in only her undergarments, which were thankfully somewhat drier than her outer clothes. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, creating a cocoon of wool and fur around her still form, then pulled her closer to the fire. Her face was starting to show some color, though whether that was a good sign or simply the reflection of the firelight he could not tell. Her breathing remained shallow and irregular. Quinton knew the real danger now was not just the cold, but what the cold had done to her body. Frostbite could claim fingers and toes, even limbs if it was severe enough. Hypothermia could stop her heart or send her into shock. He needed to warm her core temperature, and he needed to do it in a way that did not cause more harm. He heated water on the stove and soaked cloths in the warm liquid, then carefully placed them on her chest and stomach, replacing them frequently as they cooled. He chafed her hands and feet gently, trying to encourage circulation without causing damage to frozen tissue. He tilted her head back and managed to get a few drops of warm broth between her lips, though most of it dribbled down her chin. Through it all, he talked to her, his deep voice steady and reassuring, telling her about the cabin, about the storm, about how she was safe now and she was going to be fine. Hours passed. The storm continued to rage outside, battering the cabin with wind and snow, but inside it was warm and dry. Quinton never left the woman's side, constantly monitoring her breathing, adjusting her blankets, adding wood to the fire. He did not know who she was or where she had been going, but it did not matter. She was a human being in desperate need, and he would do everything in his power to save her. It was near midnight when she finally stirred, a small movement of her fingers that Quinton almost missed. He leaned forward, watching her face intently, and saw her eyelids flutter. A moment later her eyes opened, unfocused and confused, staring at the ceiling of the cabin without comprehension. "Easy now," Quinton said softly, keeping his voice low and calm. "You are safe. You are in my cabin. You were caught in the storm." Her eyes moved to his face, and he saw fear flash across them. She tried to sit up, but her body would not cooperate, and she made a small sound of distress. "Do not try to move yet," Quinton said, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder through the blankets. "You were nearly frozen to death. Your body needs time to recover." "My father," she whispered, her voice barely audible and cracked from cold and disuse. "I have to get to my father." "Right now you need to worry about yourself," Quinton told her. "There is a storm outside that will not let up until morning at the earliest. No one is going anywhere. Tell me your name." "Jessica," she managed. "Jessica Thompson. I was traveling from Truckee to Silver Ridge. My father is sick. The telegram said he might die. I have to get to him." "Silver Ridge is 2 days' ride in good weather," Quinton said. "In this storm it is impossible. I am Quinton Pierce. I found you in the snow about half a mile from here. You had collapsed and your horse was dead. Do you remember?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I remember the cold. I remember falling. I thought I was going to die." "You almost did," Quinton said bluntly. "Another hour and you would have been frozen solid. As it is, you are going to need several days of rest before you can even think about traveling. Your feet and hands may have frostbite, though I will not know the extent until the feeling comes back. For now, you need to stay warm and drink fluids and let your body heal." "I do not have several days," Jessica said, and despite her weakness, there was steel in her voice. "My father needs me." "Your father would not want you to kill yourself trying to reach him," Quinton replied. "And that is exactly what you will do if you try to go out in this storm. The best thing you can do for him right now is survive, get strong, and make the journey when it is safe to do so." I will help you get to Silver Ridge when the weather clears, but not before." Jessica stared at him, taking in his size, his strength, the absolute certainty in his voice. She seemed to realize she had no choice but to accept his help, and the fight went out of her. She closed her eyes, fresh tears leaking from beneath her lids. "He is all I have left," she whispered. "My mother died when I was 12. It has been just the two of us since then. If he dies before I can get there, if I never get to say goodbye—" "Then we will make sure you get there in time," Quinton said firmly. "But first you have to live through the night. Now I need you to try to drink some broth. Your body needs fuel to warm itself. Can you do that?" Jessica nodded slightly, and Quinton carefully supported her head while holding a cup to her lips. She managed several small sips before turning her face away, exhausted by even that small effort. Quinton laid her back down and pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Rest now," he said. "I will be right here. You are safe." Jessica's eyes were already closing, her body surrendering to the overwhelming need for sleep. Within moments, her breathing had evened out, and Quinton settled back to continue his vigil. He studied her face in the firelight, noting the delicate features, the dark lashes against pale cheeks, the soft curve of her mouth. She was beautiful, he realized, though that was not a thought that should matter given the circumstances. What mattered was keeping her alive and getting her to her father. Still, as the night wore on and he sat watching over her sleeping form, Quinton found his thoughts returning again and again to the weight of her in his arms as he carried her through the storm, to the vulnerability of her unconscious face, to the fierce determination in her voice when she spoke of her father. There was something about this woman that stirred feelings he had thought long dead, feelings he had buried along with his old life when he came to these mountains. He shook his head, dismissing such thoughts as inappropriate and foolish. She was his patient, his responsibility, nothing more. Once she was well and the storm had passed, he would help her get to Silver Ridge, and then they would part ways, returning to their separate lives. That was how it had to be. But as dawn broke over the snow-covered mountains and Jessica slept on, warm and safe by the fire, Quinton could not quite silence the small voice in the back of his mind that whispered this woman had entered his life for a reason, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The storm continued through the next day and into the following night, a relentless assault of wind and snow that made the world beyond the cabin walls disappear into a white void. Quinton was grateful for his preparations and provisions. He had enough firewood stacked in the lean-to beside the cabin to last a month, enough dried meat and preserved vegetables to feed 2 people for weeks, and a spring-fed well that provided fresh water year-round. They would be comfortable here until the weather cleared, however long that took. Jessica drifted in and out of consciousness through the first full day, waking periodically to drink broth or water, before falling back into exhausted sleep. Each time she woke, Quinton was there, patient and reassuring, helping her sit up enough to drink, checking the color and warmth of her extremities, making sure she was comfortable. The frostbite, thankfully, appeared to be minor. Her fingers and toes were red and painful as sensation returned, but there was no sign of the blackening tissue that would indicate serious damage. By the second morning after her rescue, Jessica was strong enough to stay awake for longer periods. She was also beginning to be embarrassed about her state of undress, clutching the blankets around herself and blushing whenever Quinton came near. He had hung her cleaned and dried clothes near the fire, and he brought them to her, along with a privacy screen he rigged using a blanket and some rope. "You should be able to dress yourself now," he said, keeping his eyes averted. "Though I would recommend you stay wrapped in blankets as well. Your body is still recovering and needs to stay warm. When you are ready, I have breakfast prepared." Jessica nodded, too mortified to speak. She waited until he had turned his back and moved to the other side of the cabin, before struggling into her clothes behind the makeshift screen. Everything hurt, her muscles stiff and aching from the trauma of near freezing, her fingers clumsy as she worked buttons and laces. But the simple act of being clothed again made her feel more like herself, more in control. When she emerged from behind the screen, wrapped in a blanket like a shawl, Quinton had set out plates of bacon, eggs, and fresh bread on the rough wooden table that occupied one corner of the cabin. The smell made her stomach growl loudly, and she realized she was ravenous. "Sit," Quinton said, pulling out a chair for her. "You need to eat. Your body has been through an ordeal and needs fuel to heal." Jessica sat carefully, still weak and unsteady, and picked up a fork. The first bite of eggs was like heaven, and she had to resist the urge to shovel food into her mouth. Quinton sat across from her, eating his own breakfast with the efficient movements of someone who viewed food as necessary fuel rather than pleasure, though she noticed he had taken care with the preparation. Everything was well cooked and seasoned, the bread clearly fresh baked that morning. "You are a good cook," she said between bites. "I would not have expected that from a mountain man." Quinton raised an eyebrow. "A man who cannot cook for himself in the wilderness is a man who does not survive long. I have lived here for 7 years. I have learned to be self-sufficient." "Why did you come here?" Jessica asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I am sorry, that is none of my business." "It is a fair question given that I know your story," Quinton replied. He was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. "I was a soldier in the war. When it ended, I found I could not settle back into normal life. Too many memories, too much ugliness. I needed space and silence and peace. I found it here." Jessica heard the weight behind his simple words, the depth of experiences he was not sharing. She understood the need to escape painful memories. After her mother died, she had thrown herself into her sewing, finding solace in the repetitive motions and the tangible results of her work. "You ever get lonely?" she asked. "Sometimes," Quinton admitted. "But loneliness is better than the alternative. I go into Truckee a few times a year to trade furs and buy supplies. That is enough human contact for me. Out here, life is simple. I hunt, I fish, I maintain my cabin. I am beholden to no one and responsible for no one except myself. It suits me." "Except now you are responsible for me," Jessica said softly. Quinton met her eyes across the table, and she was struck again by how blue they were, like a summer sky. "I chose to take on that responsibility when I pulled you from the snow. I do not regret it. Any decent person would have done the same." "I think you underestimate how many people would have simply left me there," Jessica said. "I owe you my life, Quinton Pierce. That is not a debt I can ever truly repay, but I want you to know I am grateful, deeply grateful." Quinton looked uncomfortable with her thanks, shifting in his chair and turning his attention back to his food. "You do not owe me anything. I did what needed to be done. Now eat your breakfast before it gets cold." They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howl of wind outside. Jessica studied the cabin as she ate, noting the sturdy construction, the well-maintained tools hanging on the walls, the shelves of books in one corner. This was not the rough hovel she would have expected from a mountain hermit. This was a real home, built with care and lived in with a sense of order and purpose. "How long do you think the storm will last?" she asked eventually. "It should blow itself out by tonight or tomorrow morning," Quinton said. "Then we will need to wait another day or two for the snow to settle and the trails to become passable. 4 days, maybe 5, and I can take you to Silver Ridge." 4 or 5 days, Jessica repeated, her voice hollow. "He could be dead by then." "He could be," Quinton agreed, not softening the truth. Or he could be hanging on, waiting for you. Mining camps have doctors, rough as they are. Your father has a chance. You have to hold on to that." Jessica nodded, blinking back tears. She would not break down in front of this man who had saved her life. She would be strong, the way her mother had taught her to be strong when life became difficult. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Jessica grew stronger, her body recovering from its brush with death, though she tired easily and spent much of her time resting by the fire. Quinton went about his daily tasks, maintaining the cabin, caring for the animals in his small barn, checking his trap lines when the storm finally broke. He was always courteous, always respectful, but he maintained a certain distance, as if afraid to let her get too close. Jessica found herself watching him when she thought he was not paying attention. She could not help but notice the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt when he chopped wood, the strength in his hands as he worked, the care he took with even small tasks. He moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of complete competence, a man who knew exactly what he was doing and never wasted motion or energy. There was something deeply attractive about that competence, about knowing you were safe in the hands of someone so capable. She also noticed the kindnesses he showed her, small things that revealed a thoughtful nature beneath the gruff exterior. He made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire. He prepared foods that were easy to digest and brought her tea without being asked. When she mentioned missing her sewing, something to occupy her hands during the long hours of recovery, he produced a needle and thread and scraps of leather, suggesting she could practice her stitches on something more forgiving than fabric. On the third day after the storm cleared, Quinton announced they could leave the next morning. The trails were passable now, though still treacherous, and he had been preparing supplies for the journey. Jessica felt a complicated mix of relief and something else she could not quite name. Relief that she would finally reach her father, but also a strange reluctance to leave the safety and warmth of the cabin. These past days, despite the circumstances, had been oddly peaceful. She had enjoyed the quiet companionship, the simple routine, the feeling of being protected and cared for. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Jessica finally voiced the question that had been bothering her. "Why have you never married, Quinton? A man like you, so capable and strong, surely you could have any woman you wanted." Quinton was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Finally, he said, "I was engaged once before the war. Her name was Margaret. When I came back, changed by what I had seen and done, she did not recognize the man I had become. She broke off the engagement and married a banker from St. Louis. I do not blame her. I was not the same person she had agreed to marry." "I am sorry," Jessica said softly. "Do not be. She made the right choice. I was in no state to be anyone's husband. I was angry and broken, and I pushed away everyone who tried to help me. Coming here, building a new life away from all the memories and expectations, that is what saved me. Out here I could heal in my own time, in my own way." "Are you healed now?" Jessica asked. Quinton turned to look at her, the firelight casting shadows across his bearded face. "I thought I was. I thought I had made peace with my solitude, that I had everything I needed right here. But then I found you in the snow and something shifted. These past few days, having someone else here, talking to someone other than myself, it has reminded me of what I gave up when I chose this life." Jessica's heart was beating faster. There was something in his eyes, something warm and intense that made her breath catch. "What have you been reminded of?" "Connection," Quinton said quietly. "The simple human need to be known by someone else, to matter to someone. I had convinced myself I did not need that anymore, but I was lying to myself. Everyone needs that." "You matter to me," Jessica said, the words coming out before she could stop them. "You saved my life, yes, but it is more than that. These days with you, talking to you, learning about you, it has meant something to me. You have been kind and patient and gentle, and I will not forget that when I leave." "When you leave," Quinton repeated, and there was something bleak in his tone. "Back to your life in Truckee, to your sewing and your friends. This will just be a strange interlude, a story to tell about the mountain man who pulled you from a snowstorm." "Is that what you think?" Jessica asked, feeling a surge of frustration. "That these days have meant nothing to me?" "That you mean nothing to me?" "What else could they mean?" Quinton said, but there was a question in his voice, a hope he was trying not to show. Jessica made a decision then, one that would change the course of her life. She stood up from her chair and crossed the small distance between them, kneeling in front of where Quinton sat. She reached out and took his large, calloused hands in her smaller ones. "They could mean that I have come to care for you," she said, looking directly into his blue eyes. "That in these few days, I have seen the kind of man you are, and I am drawn to that man in a way I have never been drawn to anyone before. I am 23 years old, and I have never felt about anyone the way I am beginning to feel about you." Quinton stared at her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes, hope and fear battling for dominance. "Jessica, you do not know what you are saying. You are grateful for being rescued, you are vulnerable and recovering. These feelings are not real." "Do not tell me what I feel," Jessica said firmly. "I am not a child and I am not confused. Yes, I am grateful, but that is not why I am saying this. I am saying this because when I look at you, I see a man I could love. A man I think I am already starting to love. And I think, if you are honest with yourself, you feel something for me too." Quinton closed his eyes, his jaw tight. "Even if I did, it would not matter. You have a life waiting for you. I have nothing to offer you but this cabin and a hard life in the mountains. You deserve better than that." "Let me decide what I deserve," Jessica said. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bearded cheek. "Look at me, Quinton." He opened his eyes, and the raw emotion she saw there nearly broke her heart. Longing and loneliness and a deep, desperate hope that he was afraid to acknowledge. "I see you," she whispered. "I see the man you are, not the man you were or the man you think you should be. I see your strength and your kindness and the gentle heart you try to hide. And I want to know that man better. I want to see where these feelings could lead." "Jessica," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "if I allow myself to care for you, if I let you into my heart and then you leave, it will destroy me. I cannot survive being broken again." "Then do not let me leave," Jessica said simply. "Or come with me to Silver Ridge, meet my father, and then we can decide together what our future looks like. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I am just asking you not to push me away because you are afraid. We both deserve a chance at happiness, Quinton. Let us take that chance together." For a long moment, Quinton did not move, did not speak. Then, slowly, he reached up and covered her hand on his face with his own, turning his head to press a kiss against her palm. The gesture was so tender, so full of barely controlled emotion, that Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes. "I do not deserve you," he said quietly, "but I am too selfish to let you go. If you are willing to take a chance on a broken mountain man, then I will do everything in my power to make you happy. I swear that to you." "You are not broken," Jessica said fiercely. "You are healing, and maybe I am too. Maybe we can heal together." Quinton pulled her up and into his lap, wrapping his powerful arms around her in an embrace that was both protective and possessive. Jessica nestled against his broad chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek, feeling safer and more content than she had in years. This was where she was meant to be, she realized. In the arms of this strong, damaged, beautiful man who had saved her life and was now offering her his heart. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, not needing words to communicate what they were feeling. Outside, the wind had died down to a gentle breeze, and through the window they could see stars beginning to appear in the clearing sky. The worst of the storm had passed, in more ways than one. The next morning they set out for Silver Ridge at first light. Quinton had prepared everything carefully, packing supplies and rigging a travois to be pulled by his sturdy mountain horse in case Jessica grew too tired to ride. But Jessica insisted she was strong enough to ride, and Quinton had reluctantly agreed, mounting her on a gentle mare he used for carrying supplies while he rode his larger stallion. The journey through the snow-covered mountains was slow and careful, Quinton's experienced eye reading the terrain and choosing the safest paths. Jessica marveled at his skill, the way he seemed to know instinctively where the snow was stable and where it might hide danger. He rode slightly ahead of her, constantly checking to make sure she was managing, ready to catch her if she showed any sign of weakness. They talked as they rode, the conversation flowing easily despite the difficult conditions. Quinton told her more about his life before the war, growing up on a farm in Ohio, learning to hunt and track from his father, the simple dreams he had once had of a wife and children and a piece of land to call his own. Jessica told him about life in Truckee, about the ladies who came to her for dresses, about the careful stitches that transformed cloth into beauty, about her father's work in the mines before his health began to fail. "What will you do if he is gone?" Quinton asked gently as they stopped to rest the horses near midday. Jessica had been trying not to think about that possibility, but she forced herself to consider it now. "I suppose I will stay in Silver Ridge long enough to handle his affairs, then return to Truckee. I have built a life there, a business. I cannot simply abandon it." "But you said you would consider a different life," Quinton said, watching her carefully. "A life with me." "I did, and I meant it," Jessica assured him. "But I also have responsibilities, Quinton. If my father is gone, there will be matters to settle, and my business represents years of work. I cannot just walk away from that without thought." "I understand," Quinton said, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "I know I am asking a lot, expecting you to give up everything for an uncertain life with me. It is selfish of me." Jessica crossed to where he stood and took his hands. "It is not selfish to want to be with someone, and I am not saying no, I am just saying we need to take things step by step. First, we get to Silver Ridge and I see my father. Then we will figure out what comes next, together. Can you trust me on that?" Quinton pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I trust you. I am just afraid of losing you now that I have found you." "You will not lose me," Jessica promised. "I am stronger than I look, and once I commit to something, I do not give up easily. You are stuck with me, Quinton Pierce, whether you like it or not." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "I like it very much." They reached Silver Ridge as the sun was setting on the second day of travel. The mining camp was a rough collection of buildings clustered in a narrow valley, smoke rising from chimneys and the sounds of men's voices echoing off the surrounding hills. Jessica felt her stomach clench with anxiety as they rode down the main street, not knowing what she would find when she reached her father's boarding house. Quinton helped her dismount in front of the building where her father had been staying, his hands steady and reassuring on her waist. "Do you want me to come with you, please?" Jessica said, grateful for his presence. She did not know if she could face what waited inside alone. They climbed the stairs together, Quinton's solid presence at her back giving her courage. The landlady directed them to a room on the second floor, and Jessica knocked tentatively before pushing open the door. Her father lay in the narrow bed, his face gray and drawn, so much thinner than when she had last seen him 6 months ago. But his eyes were open, and when he saw her, they filled with tears of relief and joy. "Jessica," he whispered, his voice weak. "You came. I prayed you would come." "Of course I came," Jessica said, rushing to his bedside and taking his frail hand in hers. "I am here, Papa, I am here." "I thought I had lost you in the storm," her father said, his eyes moving to Quinton, who stood respectfully in the doorway. "They said a terrible blizzard came through the mountains. I was so afraid." "I was caught in it," Jessica admitted, "but Quinton found me and saved my life." "Papa, this is Quinton Pierce." "Quinton, this is my father, James Thompson." Quinton stepped forward and extended his hand, which James gripped with surprising strength despite his obvious illness. "Thank you for saving my daughter's life," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." "Your daughter is a remarkable woman," Quinton said simply. "I consider myself fortunate to have found her." James looked between them, and Jessica saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "I see," he said, and there was a hint of his old humor in his tone. "Well, any man who braves a blizzard to deliver my stubborn daughter to my bedside is all right in my book." Jessica laughed, relief flooding through her. If her father could joke, he was not at death's door. "The doctor said you were dying. The telegram made it sound like you had days at most." "The doctor is a pessimist," James said. "I had pneumonia and it was bad for a while, but I am tougher than I look. I am getting better slowly. Though I will admit I was not sure I would see you again. The storm was so bad." "How did you know about the storm?" Jessica asked. "Everyone in camp knew about it. We lost 2 men who were out checking trap lines. When you did not arrive on schedule, I assumed the worst." Jessica felt tears sliding down her cheeks, tears of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. "I am here now, Papa. I am safe and you are alive and everything is going to be all right. Thanks to your mountain man," James said, smiling at Quinton. "I would like to hear the full story if you would both indulge an old man." They pulled up chairs and Jessica told her father everything. From the moment her horse collapsed to waking in Quinton's cabin, to the growing feelings that had developed between them over those storm-bound days. She was honest about her emotions, about how she felt drawn to Quinton in a way she had never experienced before. James listened carefully, his shrewd eyes moving between his daughter and the large, quiet man who had saved her. When Jessica finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Quinton, would you give Jessica and me a moment alone?" he asked. Quinton nodded and stood. "I will be downstairs. Take all the time you need." He squeezed Jessica's shoulder gently as he passed, a gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by her father. When they were alone, James took Jessica's hand. "Do you love him?" "I think I do," Jessica said honestly. "I know it is fast, I know it seems crazy, but Papa, there is something about him. He is good and kind and strong, and when I am with him, I feel like I have finally found where I belong." "What does he want from you?" James asked. "Does he expect you to give up your life and live in a cabin in the wilderness?" "He has not asked me for anything," Jessica said. "He offered to bring me here and help me, and whatever happens after is up to me." "He would never force me into a life I did not want." James nodded slowly. "I like him. I can see he cares for you in the way he looks at you, the way he speaks about you, and I trust your judgment, Jessica. You have always been smart and sensible. If you say he is a good man, I believe you. But—" Jessica prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. "But I want you to be sure," James said. "Living in the mountains is hard, Jessica. It is isolated and demanding, and there are no second chances if things go wrong. You have built a good life in Truckee, you have friends and a business and comfort. Make sure you are willing to give that up before you commit to this man." "What if I did not have to give it all up?" Jessica said slowly, an idea forming. "What if there was a way to have both?" "What do you mean?" Quinton goes to Truckee several times a year to trade and buy supplies. What if he went more often? What if I kept my business in Truckee but spent part of my time at the cabin with him? Or what if we built a life together that included both the mountains and the town? There has to be a compromise, a way to make this work. James smiled. Now that sounds like my practical daughter. Talk to him, Jessica. See if he would be willing to bend a little. If he truly loves you, he will want to make you happy, and that means finding a solution that works for both of you. What about you? Jessica asked. You need someone to take care of you while you recover. The landlady here has been managing just fine, James said. And in a few weeks, when the doctor clears me to travel, I will come back to Truckee. I am done with mining, Jessica. This illness has shown me I am not a young man anymore. I want to spend my remaining years somewhere comfortable, near my daughter. So whether you are in Truckee full-time or splitting your time between there and the mountains, I will be there. Jessica hugged her father carefully, mindful of his fragile state. I love you, Papa. I am so glad you are all right. I love you too, sweetheart. Now go talk to that young man of yours. He is probably worrying himself sick down there. Jessica found Quinton in the boarding house parlor, standing by the window and staring out at the darkening street. He turned when she entered, and the anxiety in his face softened when he saw her expression. He is going to be all right? Quinton asked. He is going to be fine, Jessica confirmed. Weak but recovering. He should be able to travel back to Truckee in a few weeks. That is good news, Quinton said, genuine relief in his voice. I am happy for you, Jessica. I know how worried you were. We need to talk, Jessica said, taking his hand and leading him to a small sofa. About what happens next, Quinton tensed, clearly preparing himself for bad news. Of course. My father likes you, Jessica started, and he understands that I have feelings for you. But he raised a good point, one I think we need to address honestly. Your life is in the mountains, mine is in Truckee. How do we bridge that gap? I told you I would not ask you to give up your life, Quinton said. If you need to stay in Truckee, I will visit as often as I can. It is not ideal, but I will make it work. What if there was another option? Jessica said. What if you moved closer to Truckee, not into town if you do not want to, but near enough that we could see each other regularly? You could still trap and hunt, still have your solitude, but we could build a life together without either of us sacrificing everything. Quinton was quiet, considering her words. I have been thinking about that too, he admitted. The cabin where I live now holds a lot of memories, not all of them good. It was where I went to hide from the world. But lately I have been wondering if maybe it is time to stop hiding, time to start living again. What are you saying? Jessica asked, hardly daring to hope. I am saying that I could build a new cabin, somewhere between my current place and Truckee. Close enough that you could keep your business, that we could be part of the community if we wanted, but still remote enough to give me the space I need. It would take time, building a new place, but I could do it. For you, I could do it. Jessica felt joy bubbling up inside her. You would do that. You would change your entire life for me. Jessica, you are asking if I would build a house for the woman I love. That is not a sacrifice. That is a privilege. I have been existing in these mountains for 7 years, but I have not been truly living. You make me want to live again. If building a new cabin closer to civilization is what it takes to have a life with you, then I will do it gladly. You love me? Jessica asked, her voice soft with wonder. You have not said that before. Quinton cupped her face in his large hands, his blue eyes intense and sincere. I love you, Jessica Thompson. I have loved you since you opened your eyes in my cabin and demanded to get to your father despite being half frozen to death. You are brave and stubborn and beautiful and kind, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore. I love you, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you will let me." "I love you too," Jessica said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much, Quinton." He kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more passionate. Jessica melted against his solid chest, her arms wrapping around his neck, feeling the strength of his embrace and the tenderness behind it. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "So we are really doing this?" Quinton asked. "Building a life together?" "We are really doing this," Jessica confirmed. "It will not be easy figuring out all the details, but we will work it out together." "Together," Quinton repeated, as if testing out the word. "I like the sound of that." They stayed in Silver Ridge for another week, making sure James was truly on the mend and had everything he needed for his continued recovery. During that time, Jessica and Quinton finalized their plans. Quinton would return to his cabin to gather his possessions and prepare for the move, while Jessica would return to Truckee to restart her business and find a suitable piece of land where they could build their new home. The parting was difficult, even knowing it was temporary. Jessica stood on the porch of the boarding house, wrapped in Quinton's arms, reluctant to let go. "It is only for a few months," Quinton reminded her. "I will come to Truckee as soon as I have everything settled at the cabin, and then we can start building our future." "I know," Jessica said. "But I am going to miss you. I have gotten used to having you near." "I will miss you too," Quinton said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Every single day. But knowing you are waiting for me will make the work go faster. And Jessica, when I come to Truckee, I am coming to stay." "This is not goodbye, this is just see you soon." "See you soon," Jessica echoed, standing on her toes to kiss him one more time. "I love you, Quinton Pierce." "I love you, Jessica Thompson," he replied. "Do not forget that, not even for a moment." Jessica watched him ride away, her heart aching but also full of hope. They had found each other against all odds, and she knew in her bones that what they had was real and worth fighting for. The months of separation would be hard, but they would get through it, and on the other side was a lifetime together. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Jessica returned to Truckee and reopened her sewing business, quickly re-establishing her clientele. Her father returned from Silver Ridge, weaker but recovering, and moved into a small house near Jessica's shop. Together, they began looking for land, searching for the perfect spot that would give Quinton the solitude he needed, while keeping them close enough to town for Jessica's work. They found it in April, a beautiful piece of property about 5 miles outside Truckee, nestled in a small valley with a creek running through it. There was a meadow suitable for building, plenty of trees for lumber and firewood, and good access to game. It was isolated enough to feel private but close enough to town to be practical. Jessica purchased it immediately, using her savings and a small loan from the bank. She sent word to Quinton through a trapper who passed through Truckee on his way into the high country, letting him know about the land, and that everything was ready for him to come whenever he was able. Then she waited, counting down the days, checking the road to town constantly for any sign of his arrival. He came on a bright May morning, riding into Truckee with a pack horse loaded with his possessions and his tools. Jessica saw him from the window of her shop and ran outside, not caring who saw her abandon her work to throw herself into his arms. Quinton caught her easily, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, his laughter deep and joyful. "I missed you so much," he said against her hair. Every day felt like a year. "You are here now," Jessica said, clinging to him. "You are really here. I was starting to worry something had happened to you." "Nothing could have kept me away," Quinton assured her. "I left as soon as the high passes were clear. I am here and I am not leaving again." "Show me this land you found for us." They rode out to the property together, Jessica riding beside Quinton and chattering excitedly about her plans for the cabin, for a workshop where she could do her sewing, for a barn and a garden. Quinton listened with an indulgent smile, occasionally interjecting with practical suggestions, but mostly just enjoying her enthusiasm. When they reached the meadow, Quinton dismounted and walked the land carefully, studying the lay of the ground, checking the water in the creek, examining the trees. Jessica watched anxiously, hoping he would approve of her choice. Finally, he turned to her with a broad smile. "It is perfect, Jessica. You found the perfect spot. I can build a good life here. We can build a good life here." "So you approve?" Jessica asked, relief flooding through her. "I more than approve. I am amazed. This place has everything we need." He pulled her close and kissed her soundly. "We are going to be so happy here." They were married in June, a simple ceremony in Truckee with Jessica's father and a few close friends in attendance. Jessica wore a dress she had made herself, cream-colored silk with delicate embroidery, and Quinton wore new clothes purchased for the occasion, though he looked slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. But when he saw Jessica walking toward him, his face transformed with such love and awe that several of the ladies in attendance began crying. The vows were traditional, but when Quinton spoke his promises to love and cherish Jessica for the rest of his days, the raw sincerity in his voice left no doubt that he meant every word. And when Jessica promised to stand by Quinton in good times and bad, to build a life with him in the wilderness they both loved, her voice rang with conviction. After the ceremony, they returned to the property to begin their new life together. Quinton had already started work on the cabin, laying the foundation and beginning to raise the walls. It would take months to complete, but they did not mind. They camped on the land, sleeping under the stars or in a small tent, working side by side during the day to build their home. Jessica discovered she loved the physical work, the satisfaction of seeing tangible results from her labor. She helped Quinton cut and stack logs, mixed mortar, even learned to notch the corners of the walls. He was patient in teaching her, praising her efforts, never making her feel incapable or weak. And she, in turn, contributed her own skills, planning the interior layout, designing built-in furniture and storage, making their cabin not just functional but beautiful. By September, the cabin was complete. It was larger than Quinton's old place, with 2 rooms instead of 1, a proper kitchen area, and large windows that let in light and offered views of the mountains. Jessica had sewn curtains and made quilts, turning the rough space into a real home. Quinton had built sturdy furniture and shelves, a large bed that dominated the bedroom, and a stone fireplace that would keep them warm through the winter. They stood together on the porch at sunset on the day they finished, looking out at the land they had claimed and the home they had built. Quinton wrapped his arms around Jessica from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Jessica asked. "For believing in me. For seeing past the broken man I thought I was and finding something worth loving. For being willing to build this life with me. For everything." Jessica turned in his arms to face him. "You were never broken, Quinton. You were healing. And I did not fix you because you did not need fixing. You just needed someone to see you clearly and love you anyway." "I am the luckiest man alive," Quinton said, kissing her forehead. "I went into those mountains to hide from life, and instead I found you. I found everything I did not even know I was missing." "We found each other," Jessica corrected. "And now we get to spend the rest of our lives together in this place we built. I cannot think of anything more perfect." Their first winter in the new cabin was cold but wonderful. Quinton hunted and trapped, providing meat and furs while Jessica sewed and maintained the house. She had set up a small workshop in one corner, where she continued taking orders from her truckee clients, making regular trips to town to deliver finished pieces and pick up new commissions. It was the perfect balance, allowing her to maintain her independence and her craft, while also being a full partner in their mountain homestead. Jessica discovered she loved the rhythm of their life together, the quiet mornings over coffee, the companionable work during the day, the evenings by the fire where they talked and read and simply enjoyed being together. Quinton opened up more in those long winter nights, sharing stories from his past, his dreams for their future. And Jessica shared her own stories, her memories of her mother, her hopes for the life they were building. In February, exactly 1 year after Quinton had found her freezing in the snow, Jessica realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Quinton, planning the moment carefully. She made his favorite dinner and waited until they were relaxed and content by the fire before taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "In about 7 months, you are going to be a father," she said, watching his face carefully. Quinton's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Jessica confirmed. "We are going to have a baby." Quinton let out a whoop of joy and pulled Jessica into his arms, careful of her middle even though there was nothing to see yet. "I am going to be a father. We are going to have a child." "Jessica, this is the best news, the most wonderful news." "You are happy?" Jessica asked, though his reaction left no doubt. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Quinton said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I would have this, a family of my own. I had given up on it. But you have given me everything. A home, a wife, and now a child. I do not have words for what that means to me." They spent the rest of the evening planning, talking about names, and how they would expand the cabin to make room for the baby, about teaching their child to love the mountains the way they did. Quinton was already fiercely protective, insisting Jessica rest more, do less heavy work, take better care of herself. Jessica found it both endearing and slightly frustrating, but she also loved him for it, loved seeing how much he already cared for their unborn child. Their son was born in September, a healthy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Quinton's father, and from the moment Quinton held his son for the first time, Jessica knew their family was complete. The big mountain man cradled the tiny infant with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes, murmuring promises to always protect him, always love him, always be there for him. "He is perfect," Quinton said, his voice awed. "Just perfect. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for giving me this gift." "He is our gift," Jessica said softly. "Our son, born of our love, and he is going to grow up strong and good like his father." Life in the cabin changed with Samuel's arrival, becoming busier and noisier and infinitely more precious. Quinton was a devoted father, rising in the night to comfort a crying baby, pacing the floor with Samuel when he was fussy, watching over him with a protectiveness that was both fierce and tender. Jessica marveled at how naturally fatherhood came to him, this man who had thought himself too damaged for normal life. James Thompson visited regularly, delighted to be a grandfather, telling Samuel stories and making toys for him as he grew. The old man's health had stabilized, and he seemed to grow younger watching his grandson learn to crawl, then walk, then run through the meadow chasing butterflies. As Samuel grew, Jessica and Quinton added to their family. A daughter followed 2 years after Samuel, whom they named Margaret after Quinton's mother. Then another son, and then one more daughter, until their cabin rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Each child was loved fiercely, raised to respect the land, to work hard, to be kind and strong. And each child grew up knowing without question that their parents loved each other deeply and completely. Jessica continued her sewing, now with daughters who learned at her knee, tiny fingers practicing stitches on scraps, while their mother worked on elaborate wedding gowns for Truckee brides. Quinton taught his sons to hunt and track and survive in the wilderness, but he also taught them to read and think and question. He wanted them to have choices he had never had, opportunities to be whatever they wanted to be. Years passed in a blur of seasons, of first words and first steps, of holidays celebrated and challenges overcome. There were hard times, winters when game was scarce and money tight, summers when drought threatened their garden. But Jessica and Quinton faced everything together, their love only deepening with each trial they weathered. On their 20th wedding anniversary, they stood on the same porch where they had stood when the cabin was new, watching their children play in the meadow. Samuel was now 19, preparing to attend college in Sacramento. Margaret was 17 and already as skilled a seamstress as her mother. The younger two were still children, full of energy and mischief. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Jessica asked, leaning against Quinton's solid frame. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I found you in the snow," Quinton said. "Other times it feels like you have always been part of my life. I cannot remember what life was like before you." "It was probably quieter," Jessica teased. "And definitely less chaotic." "It was empty," Quinton corrected. "I thought I was content in my solitude, but I was just going through the motions, waiting for life to end. You showed me what living really means. Love, family, purpose. You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," Jessica said. "I was going through the motions too, in my own way, sewing dresses for other women's happy occasions, never imagining I would have my own, never imagining I would find a love like this." Quinton turned her to face him, his hands on her waist. The years had added lines to his face and silver to his hair, but his blue eyes were as clear and intense as ever. "I love you, Jessica, more now than the day we married, though I did not think that was possible. Every day with you is a gift." "I love you too," Jessica said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "My mountain man, my rescuer, my partner in everything. I would not change a single thing about our life together." "Not even the snowstorm?" Quinton asked with a slight smile. "Especially not the snowstorm," Jessica said firmly. "Because that storm brought me to you. It nearly killed me, but it also saved me in every way that matters. It gave me you, and you gave me this life, this family, this happiness. I will always be grateful for that storm." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, surrounded by the sounds of their children's laughter and the peace of the home they had built together. Two people who had been lost and alone, brought together by a blizzard and bound by love, had created something beautiful and lasting. As darkness fell and they called their children inside for dinner, Jessica reflected on how far they had both come from that terrible night when she lay freezing in the snow, and Quinton pulled her back from death. They had not just survived that night, they had thrived, building a life richer and fuller than either had dreamed possible. Years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their children's lives. Samuel graduated college and became a lawyer, working in Sacramento but visiting often. Margaret married a kind man from Truckee and opened her own dress shop in town, carrying on the tradition her mother had started. The younger children grew and found their own paths, some staying near the mountains they loved, others venturing further afield. Jessica and Quinton grew old together, their bodies showing the wear of hard years but their spirits still strong. They spent their later years teaching their grandchildren the skills and values that had sustained them, telling stories about the blizzard that brought them together, about building the cabin with their own hands, about the rich, full life that followed. James Thompson lived to see all his great-grandchildren, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 87, content in the knowledge that his daughter had found happiness beyond his wildest dreams. They buried him in the small cemetery outside Truckee, and Jessica planted flowers on his grave every spring. When Quinton was 62, he fell ill with pneumonia, the same sickness that had once nearly claimed Jessica's father. Jessica nursed him through it with the same devotion he had shown her all those years ago when he found her in the snow. She sat by his bedside day and night, encouraging him to drink broth, keeping him warm, refusing to let him give up. "You saved my life once," she told him fiercely. "Now I am going to save yours. We are not done yet, Quinton Pierce. We have years left together, and I will not let you go without a fight." Quinton recovered, though it took months for him to regain his strength. But Jessica was there every step of the way, patient and loving, helping him rebuild his stamina and his confidence. When he was finally strong enough to walk to the meadow and chop wood again, she stood on the porch and watched with tears in her eyes, grateful for more time with the man she loved. They celebrated their 30th anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the cabin that had been the center of their lives for so long. The house rang with laughter and music, with stories shared and memories made. At the end of the night, when everyone had settled down to sleep scattered throughout the house and in tents pitched in the meadow, Jessica and Quinton slipped outside to sit on their porch and look at the stars. "This is what I always dreamed life could be," Quinton said softly. "But I never thought I would actually have it. A wife I love more than life itself. Children and grandchildren who know they are loved. A home filled with laughter and warmth. It is more than I deserve." "It is exactly what you deserve," Jessica said firmly. "You are a good man, Quinton. You always have been. The war did not change that, it just hurt you for a while. But you healed and you built this beautiful life. You should be proud." "I am proud," Quinton said. "Proud of our family, proud of what we have accomplished, but mostly I am grateful. Grateful that I happened to be checking the trails that day. Grateful that I found you in time. Grateful that you gave me a chance when you could have walked away. Every good thing in my life stems from that moment when I pulled you from the snow." "We saved each other," Jessica said, taking his hand. "I was dying in that snow, yes, but I was dying inside too, going through the motions of life without really living. You showed me what it meant to truly live, to love completely, to build something meaningful. We saved each other, and then we built this together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside, their family slept safe and warm in the home they had built with love and determination. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and beautiful, the same mountains that had nearly claimed Jessica's life, and instead given her everything she had ever wanted. The years ahead would bring more joys and more sorrows, more celebrations and more losses. But through it all, Jessica and Quinton would face everything together, their love the constant that sustained them through every season. They had found each other in a blizzard, two lonely souls seeking warmth and connection, and they had created a legacy of love that would echo through generations. On the 50th anniversary of the night Quinton found Jessica in the snow, they made the journey to the spot where she had collapsed. It took some searching, as the landmarks had changed over the decades, but Quinton's memory was sharp, and he eventually found the place. They stood there hand in hand, older and slower but still strong, still together. "I was so scared," Jessica said softly, remembering that terrible night. "So cold and so certain I was going to die. I had given up, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I had prayed." "I almost did not come this way," Quinton admitted. "I almost went straight back to my old cabin when the storm hit, But something told me to check the trails, some instinct I could not ignore. I am so grateful I listened to that voice. Fate, Jessica said simply. It was fate that brought us together. The storm, the timing, everything had to happen exactly as it did for us to find each other. And look at everything that came from that one night. Our marriage, our children, our whole life together. All because you decided to check the trails. All because you refused to give up, Quinton countered. You fought to stay alive long enough for me to find you. You could have surrendered to the cold, but you did not. You fought, and that fight saved both of us. They stood in silence for a long moment, honoring the struggle of that long-ago night and marveling at everything that had grown from it. Then Quinton pulled Jessica close and kissed her, a sweet, gentle kiss that still held all the passion and love of their younger days. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Always," Jessica replied. "As long as home means being with you." They walked back to where their son Samuel waited with the wagon to drive them home, moving slowly but steadily, their hands still clasped. Behind them, the spot where Jessica had nearly died was empty and silent, just another patch of forest floor no different from any other. But for Jessica and Quinton, it would always be sacred ground, the place where their story truly began. They lived another decade, dying within 6 months of each other in their 80s, Quinton going first as Jessica had always feared he would, and Jessica following soon after, her children said, because she could not bear to be without him. They were buried side by side in the Truckee Cemetery, their headstone reading simply their names and the dates of their lives, along with the inscription Jessica had requested before her death. 2 souls lost in a blizzard found in each other's arms. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to visit the cabin for generations, maintaining it as a family retreat, telling the story of the mountain man and the woman he saved from the snow, the love that grew from that desperate night, and the life they built together. The story became family legend, told and retold, embellished and simplified, but always honoring the essential truth at its core. 2 people, alone and frozen, had found warmth in each other. And that warmth had grown into a fire that blazed for over 50 years, lighting the way for all who came after them. It was a love story born in ice and snow, forged in hardship and determination, and sustained by the simple, profound choice to face life together rather than apart. And in the end, it was a love that proved stronger than cold, stronger than fear, stronger even than death. The cabin still stands in the meadow outside Truckee, weathered but solid, a testament to the hands that built it and the love that filled it. And on cold winter nights, when snow falls soft and thick over the Sierra Nevada mountains, locals say you can sometimes see 2 figures standing on that old porch, hand in hand, looking out at the land they claimed and the life they built, together, until the very end.